Here we go is right, Jimmy Mack. Well, you know we love having comedians around here. We got to lighten the load a little bit, especially on Self Help Sunday. We like to dig deep, but we like to do it with people who can keep it light and bright, and nobody can keep it light and bright better than our next guest, Britain Emert, joining us next. He is a comedian, an actor, a content creator, and he's taking the world by storm, especially in social media with his stand-up comedy. He hails from Hamlet, North Carolina, and his comedic style blends his experiences as a former police officer, his journey as a single dad to a spirited 3-year-old. Is she still 3, Britain, or he?
She will be 3 in April, yes.
Okay, almost 3. And his observations about life's absurdities, its ridiculousness, Jimmy. So Britain falls right into this. Before pivoting to comedy, Britain served as a police officer for 10 years. But what started as a few just kind of funny clips quickly snowballed into a massive following. When I say massive, I mean massive. Today, he has over 2 million followers on TikTok, 400,000 on Facebook. I'm sure that's grown. And it says 100 in your bio, says 170,000 on Instagram. That shows you how quickly it's growing, because if I look now, it's over 200,000. So since this bio was written, already 30,000 more people found him. So in addition to creating
including
viral
this
content,
guy,
including this girl, in addition to creating viral content, Britain has been touring as a stand-up comedian for the past 3 years, bringing his unique perspective and comedic storytelling to audiences nationwide. And Jimmy, he even stepped into the acting world recently, landed his first role as Logan in Hands of Hell. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like it's right up your alley, Jimmy
Sign
Mack.
me up.
Yep. We'll find out more about that. So please welcome to the show a guy that's going to make us laugh, maybe make us cry. I don't know. We'll see where it go. And a guy that's getting over the flu, and a child that's been sick, and he's still here with us. So you know he's a dedicated hard worker. Good morning, Britain Emert. Glad to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Britton, I'm going to just kind of jump in here in the fact that, look, there are people who have done, police work for 2 or 3 years, and they have that experience. Good for them. You did it for the better part of a decade, which means you're police. I mean, you did it. At that point, it means also that you didn't get run out of it, or, that it's like, okay, that's not for me. So you did that for a long time. And I was kind of curious, the number of people that I used to talk to when I did another kind of job who would tell me stuff about creating any sort of content. Like, I could do that. They're just getting paid for doing nothing. One of the things I noticed in some of your videos is you're quick to point out that what you're doing is real work. Did you know how much work it would be to be this kind of regular content creator when you were thinking about doing it while you were in the police? And if you want to tell your police origin story, you're welcome to. But I'm just curious about that transitional phase, about going from being the funniest guy on the squad to actually having to do it on a regular basis to maintain the presence and the following.
Oh, yeah, I don't think anyone can truly expect what comes with it. I certainly didn't. And it was never part of the plan is to do it in a full-time capacity. It's just kind of something I started out doing here and there. I had some friends that were on TikTok and stuff. Fun fact, I didn't even have TikTok whenever I initially started creating content. I downloaded TikTok to start creating content. So, and it just kind of took off for me. But, yeah, it's very demanding. You have to stay, sense of relevancy. You have to stay committed to it for sure, because anything social media-wise is 100% what you put into it, you get back. And sometimes you don't get it back. So you have to have that patience level too, and kind of wait on something to spike and just, play with things until it works.
And Brittany, you just said something that this is such a recurring theme that I notice with people with your kind of following that are actually authentic in what they're doing. But you said it was never part of the plan. And talk a little bit about that, because I see so many people that have these big followings, and I'm talking about people who have a talent behind the big following, not just the influencers who are like, look at me, I'm pretty, with all due respect to them.
Which
but
is
somebody,
me.
yes, yeah, no, I'm not talking about Jimmy here. But yeah, it's a very different thing when you end up with this following because you were actually doing a talent or sharing something authentic, and you are sharing something authentic. Somebody who hasn't had the experiences you had would come if it was somebody else, it would come across as perhaps making fun of a certain group of people. You're not. You're sharing actual stories and observations of things you've seen and putting your spin on it. So that being said, talk about the elaborate on this was not part of the plan, and then you wake up and you've gone viral. What's that kind of how that shifts your perspective?
Yeah, it was a crazy feeling for sure. But I think the most part of it, when I say it wasn't part of the plan, I guess it's kind of a contradicting statement. I think anybody that posts something on the internet wants it to do well. But it was never like, oh, I want to be famous or I want to have a lot of attention. It was more along the lines of I just kind of picked it up to do something for fun. And at the time, we were in a really bad spot in law enforcement, and arguably we're not much better as far as public perception. But people just didn't think real highly of the police, and I went on there and made things that were fun and relatable, and it was kind of me behind the badge and while wearing it, and I just kind of felt like a lot of times at work, almost like a mindless drone that people looked at me like, and I wanted to just give some perception of that just not being the case. You know what I mean? I wanted to
Yeah.
show people that, hey, I'm wearing a uniform, but I still have a heart behind this. I still have feelings and people I care about, and I'm still relatable as a human, even if I'm not relatable to you as a cop. So
Yeah.
it was a very interesting dynamic, and I think that I want to say I would like to say I achieved that to some degree.
I I
You
think that's
did.
a
You did.
really
You have.
you have, and I think it's really important to kind of point this out because when the public begins to make that turn away from law enforcement, what's also forgotten too is that law enforcement begins to turn away from the public, and you know
Right.
exactly what I'm talking about here, where we've been around those kind of police officers, and I have a great deal of empathy for them when they start saying stuff like, "Well, regular citizens don't know." And my partner and I used to always tell them, you have to be a regular citizen because you're protecting and
Hmm.
serving the community of which you are a member. And it's so important to kind of communicate to the community that you're a member of it, that you like, that you eat at McDonald's or Wendy's, that you listen to the same music with certain people in the community. And it's so important to communicate that because we've all been in those environments, Britain, where we begin to feel like we are a group apart, that people don't understand who we are, and you start kind of insulating yourself from the rest of the world. And you know what I'm talking about here. Cops that hang out only with cops, cops
Yep.
that live in communities only with cops, cops that think everybody is up to something, even citizens who aren't up to something. But part of that is caused by the citizens turning away. So what you've done here is kind of reached out and try to say, look, we're you. And if we're not you, that's a real problem, right?
Right. Right, absolutely. I mean, I think disassociation as a police officer, especially, I would probably say anywhere from 3 to 5 years in is probably the most socially dangerous time for a police officer. I mean, at that time, you're coming into really being invested into the career. You're coming into really experiencing certain things and watching people come and go, watching some people unfortunately not make it through the profession, whether that's, getting injured on the job or just simply saying, hey, man, this isn't for me. You know, because even as once I got a little seasoned in the police, I remember sitting down. I was a training officer. I'd sit down with a couple of kids, man, that coming out of the academy, and we'd have something really bad happen, and they just be like, "Man, I don't know if this is what I want to do." And it's just you almost see it in real time of people disassociating from what they seen or perceived as a normal life before becoming a cop into, oh man, I only want to hang out with guys on shifts, or I want to hang out with these certain people, and like you said, move into kind of cop communities. I live in a neighborhood still, and it has 4 or 5 cops in it. It's just out of just something I've always done. I tend to look for that. So, old habits die hard, and I think it's something that's going to stick with me, which may not necessarily be a bad thing. But yeah, I definitely tried to bring out a different side of it to show people, because like you said, if you can't be a part of your community, you can never properly serve your community because you can't relate.
Well, and also, if we don't laugh, we'll cry. So, what you've done here
Right.
is bridge the gap. So, everything you said is yes, but remembering we're human. It's something our own audience as truck drivers struggle with in a different way than cops, but same thing. They're seen as, by sometimes out on the road as the big daunting truck on the road, and the drivers are like, "Hey, I'm actually just trying to do my job and get home to my family just like you. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm
Right.
actually here to look out for you, quite the opposite." And so it's similar in that regard. But you mentioned that some people not being able to cut it because of the things that you've seen. So you know that, as I told you off air, I love to talk about trauma. And so the things that you've seen, and while that's not your trauma, going into people's homes and seeing just the crime and the evil things that we do to each other out there, unfortunately.
Right.
You've seen that, and I don't know how much of it you would say became your own trauma by proxy, but then you were able to turn this into comedy and bridge this gap. So maybe just walk us through that a little bit. The if you don't laugh, you'll cry, because things we have to shift. But how many? I guess my question is, of the stuff you've seen, was there ever a moment where you're like, I need to process this and deal with this, or did you process it through humor? Is that your way to get through the things that you'd seen and now make a career of it?
Initially, not at first. There is a very, very strong level of disassociation because you have to think about it. Most of the time, especially living in a or working in a crime area, you see people at their worst every day, constantly. That's all you're seeing. You're very rarely seeing someone in a good moment, aside from in a counter in a store where it's like, hey, how are you doing today? You know what I mean? Most of the time, you're getting called to someone's worst moment, and you're processing them through that. You're processing what's happening, so you're almost taking it from them, to an extent, because energy can never be destroyed. It can only, be redirected, and you kind of take that energy on. And after having like the highs and lows all day long for a 12-hour shift, you're going into a hot call, coming down from a hot call, doing a report, going back in, and it just tends to tank you. So at first, really, the way I dealt with it was going home and not speaking. I couldn't have a conversation for hours of going home because I was just mentally exhausted. So then I had to bring myself to a way of, actually coping with it. And as you progress in law enforcement, and any cop will probably tell you, the dark humor comes along with the job, and you just kind of learn to joke it off. And it's almost like ignoring the problem, but you're not. It's a way of coping with it, and some people may or may not understand it. So I think comedy was definitely a good way to do it. And what I love about what I do too is it's not just relatable to a police officer; it's relatable to any job. Like you said, for truck drivers, they're gone for hours or days or weeks or whatever. They're just trying to get back home. And I think that everything that I do isn't just specific to cops. It's relatable to life in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because we all have that crazy neighbor. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, the tin foil around the phone, I literally just started shaking my head going, I didn't just, experience things like this in a different world. I experienced this next door. Like, what are you doing? I'm putting this tin foil in the microwave. Why? To preserve my data. Why? Well, as long as you don't hit the button, you should be fine. And then we hear in the background the button go off, and we're like, oh, no. And, it's really funny because one of my friends, somebody said, why are all these cops in this coffee shop? And a friend of mine turned to me and he said, they're all here, he said, because they're getting the chance to be around people having a great day. And there's something to be said for that. You sit there in the coffee shop. Everybody walking into a coffee shop's having a pretty good day. First of all, they can afford coffee. Second of all,
Right.
They're not in the run from anybody. They have a moment to take a break. And it is nice to kind of, remember that there are oases of sanity that you can return to. And that's such an important thing. And in this TikTok sensation you've created, it is an oasis of sanity. I did want to ask you, though, is there a story that you experienced that you have not yet put up there, or a combination of elements you haven't put up there because there's something great to do with it? You haven't quite figured it out yet. You following me at all, Britton?
Yeah, there's so much over 10 years, man. It's to just compact into one 30 to 60-second video. But one thing that I do is, especially in stage presence, because a lot of being a cop, when people look at it, they think it's these serious moments and stuff. But I personally love to joke on I love to tell when I screwed up or when I done something that was laughable. Yeah. And a lot of my content was that in the first. I start off with story times when I really deep dove into the law enforcement side of it, and I would tell embarrassing stories of things where I'd done stuff that most people wouldn't want to tell. You know what I mean? Because if you can laugh at yourself, man, you can laugh at anything.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
But okay, but here's the thing that I want people to understand. Being funny is one thing. I pride myself on when I'm not in a bad mood, which is rare, but being funny. But I am no comedian. That is a whole different, being up on stage and doing comedy. As I'm a performer and a singer, but the idea of doing stand-up comedy gives me debilitating diarrhea because that is so terrifying. And a lot of these comedians have been, people have been trained to do it or studied with the groundlings or, wherever they've gone. You made this pivot into, you saw you were funny. I'm guessing, I don't know if anybody in the squad ever encouraged you, like, hey, you've got something here outside of us just laughing at you. Did anyone ever encourage you? Was there any training involved? But what was that moment when you stepped off of social media and stepped on stage? Because that is terrifying to me, but you've been able to do it. How have you been able to do that?
Oh man, I think the biggest trait that I've taken from law enforcement that I put into stand-up comedy is adaptability, and that's such a big thing in the stage presence, because you got to think you're in front of. I think the last show I did, I was in front of, like, we did a promo, it was like 100 people, but the most I've ever been in front of is like 500. So you're up there with 500 people, give or take, and you have to adapt to that show, because some things may work for one audience, it may not work for another, and you have to literally, in real time, while your mind is just going 1,000 miles per hour trying to stick to a set, you have to read people in that crowd, see who's enjoying it, see who you can bounce off of, and see who's going to kind of give you that back to make it a good show for everyone. And adaptability is so important, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've taken from law enforcement is the ability to take a stressful moment, slow it down, and process it, and then react to it how I need to.
Well, I'll tell you this, and this is something I think you'll get, is that you have a unique understanding of butterflies in a way that a lot of people who haven't performed in 500. If you perform in front of 500 people, I've had that joy as well. There's the butterflies come, that gasoline that you feel right in your gut, but you've already had it.
Yeah.
You've already had it. You know what that feels like in a very different and even more high-stakes situation. So that's where the adaptability, it seems to me, kind of comes in. It's like, oh, I know this feeling. Oh, my God, it's the same feeling, just the stakes are different. The situation is different, right? So did you kind of recognize the first time you got those floaters in your gut before you hit the stage and go, oh, no, I've been here before. I know the way out. And it's about slowing down. You're absolutely right, right?
Yeah, man, I've been doing this for 3 years, and I'll tell you right now, before I get on stage, it's the same thing every time. I am losing it for a minute, but the moment that I step out there, is that moment that you're talking about, is where I can be like, hey, I've been here before. I recognize this feeling. I can work myself through this, and I'm going to be okay. And it's almost like a switch that as soon as I see the people and I walk out through the curtain, it's like, okay, here we are. This is actually, it's so weird because it's actually a level of comfort. As uncomfortable as it is, it's a familiar feeling and it's comfortable. So definitely. And actually, the first time I stepped on stage wasn't even the plan, and that sounds really weird. I didn't intend to start doing shows. So I did group comedy for a while. For probably 2 years of the first 2 years I did comedy, I did group comedy with a bunch of other cops. And we just wanted to go out and meet people that followed us. We weren't really even intended to do a show. We ended up getting on stage and doing a bunch of improv stuff and kind of joking, and it was hilarious, and everybody had a great time. So like, hey, well, maybe we should do this a couple more times. And it took off, man. I mean, it went from selling 100 meet and greet tickets to something that was a complete and total accident to selling out a show in Texas with 350 people, like 2 months later.
Well, and you talked about the pre-show ritual. By the way, we're talking to Britain Emert. You can go to Britton, Britton, Emert, Emert, official.com and find out everything about him. You could find his TikTok there, his Snapchat, Instagram, all the other places you can follow him, see his tour dates as well. You talked about the pre-show thing. So have you developed any sort of pre-show rituals, or do you have something you do backstage or prior, getting ready, or more importantly, what do you do after the show to decompress? Pre and post.
Absolutely, I do. I think any performer has a pre-show ritual. It's actually kind of funny. I've never met this guy, but he's very big in Nashville. I had friends that are friends with him. Chase Matthews, I'm sure you know him. Mm-hmm. Every time I go on stage, and this was a total accident how this became a pre-show ritual, I listen to his song Born for This. And it's kind of about people doubting him and overcoming that and knowing that where he's at is where he's supposed to be. So I kind of do that to put myself in a mindset of I wouldn't be here if I didn't work hard to deserve to be here. It's kind of reminding myself that I have earned this, and I have earned at least the shot at doing this.
I love that. As I do as well, Lindsay.
Great answer.
because one of the big things is that the imposter syndrome kicks in. Because at some point, and I don't want to give you the yips automatically, how many times you've been on stage in the first 5 minutes and you start saying, "I'm Britton Emert, and I am talking in front of," so that you're doing your act, but you're also telling yourself who you are and how in the hell did I get here. That's a big thing, man, where you're just like, where you literally are telling yourself you don't belong up there while you're up there doing your thing. Has that ever occurred to you? And if it hasn't, I'm sorry I introduced it.
No, I think self-doubt's a very real thing. But self-doubt is just like a cancer. If you let it live there and you let it go and you don't remove it to some degree, then it's going to continue to grow. And I think that's when I kind of take myself back to being a parent, because one thing that I've always said I want to instill in my daughter is self-confidence. Is, hey, if you work towards something, you can do it. And even if you can't do it, at least you tried, because the only time you're going to fail is when you don't do it. So I take that back, and how can I set that example for my daughter if I can't live it myself?
Boy, does that land.
Yeah.
That lands like a ton of bricks. And that becomes evangelization by example. We were talking about that yesterday. I have to ask this question. You already mentioned somebody else. I always ask this of comedians and musicians. Who are some of your biggest influencers? Who are people that you just adore as comic talents?
Oh, man. I would probably say it's going to be way off the wall, because my comedy is nowhere near this man's, but I really enjoyed the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, man. I remember watching that with my grandparents back in the day, which, sorry if anybody was in their adult life when that came out. I was not. But I remember watching it, so I love those guys.
That tracks.
Of course, the modern guys too. I mean, Kevin Hart, Matt Rife. Dude, I respect that dude so much. That's just opportunity meeting preparation. That's the epitome of that statement.
Well, the blue collar comedy that tracks that would be an influence for you, especially based on the things that you've seen and how you've shaped your content. I also want to point out, because you mentioned your child as well, who's about to be 3, and you've been doing stand up for 3 years. So I find that timeline interesting, that and the time you became a father is actually when you also stepped on stage. Because do you, I mean, my songwriting changed exponentially after I had a kid. So your content obviously also changes exponentially after having a child. It gives you more content, but it also focuses you in, because you have to prioritize. You can't just say yes to everything you want and fly by the seat of your pants, because you have this other human you have to take care of. So how have you figured a way to balance those two?
That's a work in process every day.
Yeah, fair.
It's definitely, there's no manual. There's no, this is how you do this. You kind of just.
Well, there are lots of manuals, but don't read them, because they're not speaking to you specifically.
They're not right.
Yeah,
they're not right.
Yeah, right. I think I booked our first show, and probably like 3 weeks later, I found out I was having a kid. So I was like, oh, the timing is beautiful here.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah, I have my kid 50-50. With me and her mother have a great relationship. We co-parent so well. But I think that mostly it's just me kind of trying to balance all these things, because I'm in and out of town a lot.
Well, you're
Britton,
you're balancing it perfectly. You can go to BrittonEmertOfficial.com. Don't go anywhere. Thank you, Britton.
Hold on tight.